to the open side. Karim Bete. Lovely ball here to Samu, who's quick. Pete Samu looking for Karim Bete. Back to Samu. Oh, that is wonderful. That is wild. That is amazing from the Wallaroos.
Hello and welcome to Pick and Drive Rugby, we're the People's Podcast providing a platform for rugby lovers to come together and support the game that's played in heaven. I'm Ando, with me are Mitch and Lockie, and I have to tell you guys, this has been one of the best weekends of rugby in recent memory. Mitch, how freaking good were the games this weekend?
I think we can, without a doubt, confidently say that this has been the best World Cup to date. And I think even Shawnee said something on Twitter that was like, up until this point, this has been the best World Cup we've ever had. And anything past this point is just a bonus. And you couldn't say it much better than that.
I was speaking to some people at work today who were asking about the games over the weekend. And I was like, the Ireland-New Zealand game was the best game of rugby I've ever watched. And then I watched the France South Africa game and it was just as good. And how incredible is that? Lockie, were you just overstimulated from the amount of quality rugby that was available?
I felt naughty. I felt guilty being able to enjoy that much quality footy because we've honestly been deprived the past few years. Maybe it's just because we've been watching the Wallabies who haven't quite been up to scratch. But I mean, it's just been an incredible tournament so far. And all the noise about the quarterfinals are unfair or whatever, that doesn't matter because we got four of the best games of rugby we've seen in the professional era. Each of them in their own way was seesawing, spectacular, amazing tries. And the atmosphere that they've built in this World Cup is the best. We saw it in 2019. Everyone hailed that as an incredible tournament, the new benchmark. France 2023 is that new benchmark now.
Yep, without a shadow of a doubt. And so we've had four incredible games of rugby across the weekend, and we're going to be diving into those in this quarter final review. One of the things that we will say is this is going to be the first of two podcast episodes this week. We are going to be recording on Tuesday night as well, because there is an incredibly significant Eddie Jones announcement that is going to be being made tomorrow morning. Now, let's actually just take a moment to hypothesize and theorize what might be happening. Now, there's a few different ways that it could go. I'm going to go the simple and boring one, which I hope doesn't actually happen in some ways. I wonder if tomorrow they'll be saying things are all good. Eddie Jones is staying in a role. I'm wholly committed to Australian rugby for the next 4 years, and that's going to be the announcement. That's. I wonder if that's it. That's what I'm putting forward. Lockie, what's your suggestion of what could be happening tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at Coogee Oval?
I think it's going to be a press conference, Ando, and I don't think you're allowed to push me on that one. But it's going to be entertaining regardless. And for all the noise that's been generated in the wake of the Wallabies campaign, this is that crux, right? It's all been building towards this. What's Eddie's future? These conversations allegedly with other countries, have they been happening? Does that all get revealed at this presser? So I think just about every Australian rugby fan or even observer, and dare I say a few of its many critics, will be tuning in for that one.
You just know that Jamie Pandaram is going to be down at Coogee Oval, ready and waiting to put out another article. Mitch, what's your theory on what's going to be coming?
I'd love for it to be that Eddie Jones is resigning from the Wallabies and just to say he's stepping away to focus wholly on the Japanese role. That would be, if he did do that, that would be a little nonsensical at this point because he hasn't been confirmed as getting that role. He's just in the second round of interviews or the last round of interviews. From what's being reported, he's got a face-to-face interview in November sometime. So if he was to front the media and say, I'm stepping away from Australian rugby to pursue other opportunities, and then he loses that job offer as well, I think in some ways that might be like the best outcome for everyone. Eddie Jones ends up unemployed, goes away into the back pages of rugby, and we don't hear from him again for a few years.
I thought you were going to say he's going to take time away to work on himself. Bit of a hot Eddie summer.
He probably needs that, to be honest. He's been hot and fiery ever since he came in.
Probably needs a break to cool down. But either way, that's going to be coming tomorrow. in the next episode we do. We're also going to have, I believe, Jim from the basically rugby report card coming on and talking to us. He's going to be sharing some of his thoughts because the boys love to have a strong opinion and word, and we'd love to get that involved on this podcast as well. Mitch, you're going to take us through the tipping comp results so far. We've got 2 rounds remaining.
All right. So the first thing that I need to say and pump up my own tires is that I've jumped into the top 20. So for the first time in this World Cup, I'm actually able to see the leader without having to go to another page in the World Cup page. So at least I'm happy with that. So well done to me and everyone. Thank you. I do deserve that. But in first place, we have Kakadu on 457 points. Second place, we have Lieb on 422. Followed very closely by Felix 9 in third place on 420 points. So there is a bit of a gap there between first and second, but second and third at the moment are neck and neck.
All right, moving into the first quarterfinal of the weekend. We had Wales versus Argentina. Wales going down 17-29. Now, boys, I'm faced with a bit of a conundrum here because when Australia was knocked out in the pool stages, just to remind you in case you'd forgotten, I was able to really easily shift across to my genuinely half Welsh heritage. So I had a team that I could naturally align myself with. But at this point, I'm not Argentinian. There's no way in hell you would find me supporting New Zealand. I'm not South African. So the last actual opportunity with my familial heritage is England. But my life motto is anyone but England. So I really don't know what to do here. Lockie, help me out. What was this game like and what were some of the takeaways from it?
Oh, this game was a roller coaster in every sense, because not only were players battered and bruised, refs were battered and bruised. It was monumental. We saw Jaco Piper being the first referee subbed off in, I can't remember anyone being subbed off since Nigel Owens back in the day, popping a hammy in a English Premiership game. So it was really exciting from start to finish. 29 points to 17, the Argentinians came up, and it was all down to 2 men. There was Emiliano Boffelli, the big boff, who we know can kick him from everywhere, and he did. 55-metre penalty to cap off his 17-point haul. But it was the forgotten man of this Puma side. It was Nico Sanchez, who's been shafted in favour of Santi Carreras for the past couple of seasons now, and he had 12 minutes of almost flawless footy from Nico Sanchez, got himself an intercept try, kicked well, and closed out the game for the Pumas. So it was an amazing turnaround from what was an undefeated Welsh side, looking pretty comfortable heading into half-time.
Mitch, Argentina racking up 29 points overall. They, in some ways, have snuck under the radar so far this Rugby World Cup. We've had other major teams that we've been focusing on, and their pool with England perhaps wasn't as headline-grabbing as some of the other ones within the competition. Do you think they realistically have a chance coming up against New Zealand? What did you see from them within this game that you think gives them hope moving forward?
Yeah, look, that's a pretty loaded question there. I don't think anyone, and we'll get to the New Zealand game in a moment, but the way New Zealand played in this game, all the doubters have been proven wrong. The way they held off Ireland at the end, went as deep as they did into overtime and still didn't let Ireland score any points. New Zealand played an incredible game this semi-final. Argentina also played an incredible game in their semi-final. I don't know if you go back to the last time Argentina played New Zealand and it wasn't a great outcome for Argentina. You go back to that game in Christchurch, I believe, that was last year, where they beat them for the first time. And so they have beaten New Zealand in recent memory, and you would imagine that they'll be hanging on to that pretty tightly and thinking of ways that they can win this game. One thing, just focusing back on this game, that I kind of found by watching it was Wales didn't do themselves any favors, particularly that incident right before halftime where I believe it was George North knocked over one of the Argentinian players and they turned into this big scuffle. There was a penalty given afterwards. Whether it was a yellow card or not is a discussion for another day. But Argentina got really fired up from that point. And from that point on, they unleashed the mongrel. And we've known that Argentina are a team that thrive on passion. And Wales, up until that point in the game, were pretty dominant, were leading most of the statistics and were dominating that game. By getting Argentina angry, they awoken the beast, and they ended up rolling on it and getting the victory at the end there.
Mate, that is a brilliant segue into the Ireland-New Zealand game, because you mention a beast, and there is nobody else that we can speak about other than Ardie Savea. He was deservedly the man of the match, but he was absolutely brutal in almost everything that he did. His involvements at the big moments of the game were so incredibly important, and we saw what, at the time of me watching it, I declared personally as the best game of rugby I've ever watched in terms of the quality. So Ireland went down 24-28 against New Zealand in an absolutely breathtaking encounter. Ireland were pretty far behind on the scoreboard early into the first half, but clawed their way back in. And New Zealand were able to just keep their noses out in front and then hold off against 39 phases of defense. 39 phases. They were able to keep the Irish out and not give away a penalty. What an amazing, amazing moment. Lockie, I'll come back to you for this one. How did you catch your breath after this game? What were your immediate feelings with this epic encounter finishing up the way it did?
It was awe. It was awe for me, awe at both sides. I thought it was just a cracking contest in every sense of the word. The brutality of it was something I haven't seen in a really long time in a test match. I think you'd have to go as far back as, maybe some of those 2007, 8, 9 battles between the All Blacks and the Springboks, when there was that peak sort of Bok period after the 07 World Cup win as far as physicality is concerned. But they were immense. And you put credit to Ardie, and rightly so, but I have eyes only for Captain Kane. He was terrific in every sense of that word. 22 tackles, a couple of turnovers. He was still among their top ball carriers as well before he went off. I mean, this guy's a machine, and he gets lambasted all the time in New Zealand media and world media about not even being the best 7 or in a match day squad in New Zealand. Yet every time that he's had to, he steps up and he shows you why he was the heir to Richie McCaw. Not Dalton Papali'i, not Ardie Savea. It's Kane's 7 jersey, and that's a huge rap and a huge honour. So power to him. He deserves every accolade after that one.
Mitch, there were some incredible players that stood out across both teams. We've already mentioned Ardie Savea. We've had Sam Cane pinged as well. Across, obviously, both Ireland and New Zealand, who would you be suggesting are players of note that we should be speaking to within this match?
Yeah, I think we've got it. We can't go any further without mentioning Johnny Sexton. His final game for Ireland, everything that he's done up until this point in the game, and the disrepute that he put himself in earlier in this year with the salty kind of way that he got that ban and potentially missed it, and missed a few games of the World Cup and could have potentially missed the whole thing. The fact that he's finishing his international career with this game, it would have been a fantastic fairy tale finish for him had they been able to score a try or score some points at the end of the game and beat New Zealand and send them packing and to make it into the first ever semi-final that Ireland have ever played in. They probably did deserve that. As much as you say New Zealand deserved to win this game, Ireland probably deserved to win this game based on the last 4 years they've had the World Cup cycle. Unfortunate to see them not be able to get it done at the end there, and to watching this as a neutral. I was backing Ireland. I wanted to see Ireland win, but I had tipped New Zealand, and gosh, it was so exciting. I didn't have a horse in the race realistically, but just watching the final probably 10, 15 minutes of this game, not sure which way it was going to go. It was just like heart in mouth stuff the whole time. I can't imagine how heartbreaking it would have been to be an Irish fan to lose in the state that they did.
Mate, I found myself in the final moments of the game, like properly cheering on for New Zealand, because I don't know. As an Australian rugby fan, I don't have the hatred or the antipathy towards New Zealand that so many other Aussie rugby fans do. I just don't. And so I was proper cheering them on, partly partly because of the Southern versus Northern Hemisphere bias and wanting a Southern Hemisphere team to win, partly because because of fantasy rugby, like a lot of the New Zealand players. So I have an attachment. I particularly love Artie Sevilla. He's one of my favorite rugby players going around, even with his kind of like throat slitting gesture in the ear that kind of just endeared him to me even more. But the biggest joy within this entire result is that Ireland yet again have been kicked out of the Rugby World Cup in the quarterfinals. And it's just, at this point, it's just ridiculous because they're such a good team. And the fact that England are currently through to the semi-finals, and Ireland and France, obviously we'll get to that in a moment, but Ireland and France are both going home and out of the competition is just an absolute joke. So much has already been said about the pool format and the way in which it's all been chosen. But I mean, come on, the number one team in the world getting kicked out in the quarters and England going through into the semis. Like, what a joke. Let's jump into a couple of the big moments from this game because there were so many. We had the opening try to Leicester Fainga'anuku. And do you just want to talk us through that and what that showed about New Zealand and their kind of their approach to the game, Lockie?
Oh, goodness, you've put me on the spot there. I think I'd have to handle that. But honestly, the try that stood out, and I can't comment on the Fainga'anuku because I didn't break it down enough, but what stood out to me from all that game was the support lines that New Zealand back three are able to inject in. And I know this was something similar, but what springs to mind is the Will Jordan try and the lines that they are consistently able to back up through that inside channel. It's almost like your wingers and fullback are intuitively running that 9 line, that traditional support on the inside. And I think that's been a hallmark of New Zealand's success all through this tournament. Mitch, have you got a better read on Fainga'anuku's try?
Oh, I only watched bits and pieces of this game, so
I'll go.
I don't have too much to unpack that one. And
I'll jump into it then. Mate. I'll jump into it. So, like, the reason why I picked this one out is because it's the one where Bodie Barrett does a chip over the top, collects the ball right as James Elliott is about to hit him, gets absolutely smashed within the tackle, is able to then pass it off, and Fainga'anuku goes through then for the try. And it just showed the capacity of Beauden Barrett to inject himself into matches. And he's had a bit of a quiet international season earlier within the year. He probably hasn't reached the heights that saw him kind of World Player of the Year contention a few years back. And I think that he and Richie Mo'unga have still been working out that kind of 10-15 axis and where they're going to be injecting themselves. But man, it worked today. And Richie Mo'unga's break within the second half where he just cut through the Irish defensive line in between, I think it was their hooker and one of the loose forwards, I think, defending at the back of the line out. And he just cuts through with Will Jordan on the inside. The pace at which the two of them hit the line, those poor forwards decided who it was that they were meant to be tackling in that moment. And you just saw one of the best tries scored against Ireland, which they made it look easy. And yet this is a New Zealand team which is underperformed. So I've previously within the year. So I found it really, really odd to see how effective they were and how fired up they were for this game. Why don't we go through a couple of other moments? Mitch, anything you wanted to speak to about this game? Lockie, then back to you, and then we might continue on with England-Fiji. So, Mitch.
Yeah, I think one of the players from an Australian perspective that's been fantastic to see for Ireland is Mac Hansen in these past few years. And there was a bit of a turning point, I think, in the game when he went off, 55th minute or so. With that calf injury, and his replacement was good, but I don't think he definitely doesn't have the time in the saddle and the experience on a big stage that Mac has. And you could tell that he made a few good runs. The first time that he got the ball, he had an an exciting break, I'll say. But Mac Hansen he looked every time he touched the ball like he would beat a defender or two, and he was just a highlight reel. Up until that point, he wasn't 100% fit in this game, and you could tell that. If he was 100% fit and he didn't have the niggly injury leading into this, I think he would have been a determining factor in getting the win for Ireland. Unfortunately, he did only get to play 55 minutes, but they didn't look as cohesive a unit when he wasn't out there on the wing.
Yep. Lockie?
No, you've absolutely nailed that one. And again, the fact that we'll see him in a Lions jersey in Australia in 2 years just shits me. He's such an asset that we've lost, and it's such a shame. But the standout
He'll
moment
beat
for
the
me-
Brumbies. He will score the try that beats the Brumbies in Canberra.
At this point, the
and it'll
Brumbies are
just
the
be
only team that's winning against the Lions. We'll have the standout from all this, even though you went through 86, was it 86 minutes in the end that was defended? It was an incredible amount of time after extra time. Is seeing the man over the ball in the dying seconds is again Sam Whitelock. Is there a better big game player in the world? You can throw out an Artie Sevilla, maybe a Andre Pollard for his clutch kicking, but in the modern era, Sam Whitelock, he's won over 120 tests. Don't worry about played. He's won 124 tests and countless titles with Canterbury and the Crusaders. You cannot beat this experience. And when you look at that and you look at the prowess that they've got and the runs on the board that New Zealand squad has, of course they were going to do well. And the flip side of that, what about our Aussie squad? Where was our experience?
How
100%.
I was wondering if the referee was going to ever blow a penalty in New Zealand's favour. There was so many attempts in that last 36 phases. I think Artie Sevilla maybe 4, 5, 6 phases before got a pretty good steal on the ball as well, and got cleaned out, and you could just see him lie on the ground screaming at the touchy. But I was just wondering, if Ireland wins this, I think New Zealand would rightly be aggrieved, because there was 2 phases at least, or 2 stances in that phase count where they would legitimately over the ball, had won the contest, and Ireland weren't releasing. But Wayne Barnes just kept saying, no, hands off, let it play. Let's just keep playing it and play it out.
And that's the difference between a 4-point margin and a 3 in the referee's mind. That's a 3-point margin. Those are getting blown more, but it's just those tiny little things that change the dynamics of the game. And a 4-point margin was the defining factor. Otherwise, you're probably looking at a penalty being called in Ireland's favour earlier to go with the ebb and flow of the game, and maybe there's extra time.
Yeah, and look, there's so much to go in there, because I thought Wayne Barnes was absolutely brilliant, and I love the way that he honestly just let the boys play in those final moments where there were a couple of points where you're like, another ref might have actually called that up. Like if it was Matthew Ray now, he would have given everybody kind of Christmas cards with a photo of him on the front of it. With
we play.
Saying, we play. But I just loved it. And so 2 quick things before we finish. Just jumping onto that Mac Hansen comment. It was really interesting when you look at the stats after the game to look at, this was the first time that Ireland have really tried to play with width within this whole competition. So they'd averaged just 8% playing 30 meters or more wide from the previous ruck. So only 8% of the time they have the ball, they're moving it 30 meters wider. This game, 17. So more than double. They are trying to stretch the All Blacks defensive line. And yet you have one of the best players in injecting himself into the line and providing those overlapping runs, Mac Hansen, who was under a bit of an injury cloud and then had to go off relatively early within the game. So there's maybe something to be said for that, and whether or not the width should have been adjusted to the injury status of Mac Hansen, maybe, just a thought. And then the other point that I wanted to quickly bring up, we've spoken a lot about New Zealand players, maybe because we're more familiar with them, having played in a rugby championship and the like, but I do just need to call out Bundy Aki. He was incredible. 20 carries, the most on the pitch, 68 meters, and had the most post-contact meters of anybody on the pitch. 7 defenders beaten, line break, and a turnover. He was incredible. We talk about Artie Sevilla being immense for the All Blacks. Bundy Aki was immense for Ireland. So, Mitch, one last comment, then we move on.
Just on the Bundy Aki one, I thought it was perfect timing. My wife walked in the room and was watching the game over my shoulder as it was on. And I just said to her, oh, check out number 12 for Ireland. He's one of the best players in the world at the moment. And seconds later, he makes that break and scores the try. And I was like, and that's exactly why. So that was just perfect timing for him, just showing off against New Zealand. But my final point was just around the haka. How cool was it in this game to see New Zealand doing the haka, like a really intense, all-out haka, and you couldn't hear a word of it. They were even mic'd up on the coverage, and all you could hear was the Irish fans around the stadium singing. I thought it was awesome. There was another. It happened as similarly in the next game as well, in the England-Fiji game. I don't think that one had quite the same effect, but I really liked seeing that Ireland were, the fans themselves were actually drowning out the haka gave me goosebumps watching it. That's what we love rugby.
We definitely do love that fan participation and a way in which different crowds and different countries choose to respond and welcome or put pressure upon the traveling team. So that's awesome. Now, moving into the third quarterfinal, England 30, Fiji 24. This was a game that ended with a little bit of controversy. You had some pretty spicy comments being made by the Fijian captain in a post-match press conference. Simon Raului, the head coach, perhaps being a little bit more gracious or being a bit more measured, I should say. Measured is a better word for it, in defeat. But, Lockie, your beloved Fijians not being able to get the job done.
I know. I feel like I put the mockers on them because I tipped against them too. I just thought it's a bridge too far after the Portugal game and the Georgia game. They didn't have those heights of the early Wales and Australia performances. So I never really thought Fiji had a chance in this one, but they proved me wrong for the vast majority. Well, no, that's a lie. They proved me right up until about the last 12 minutes, scoring those 2 tries. And all of a sudden, I thought I was looking foolish again. But England, they continue to plug their way in a very stodgy manner across to another semi-final. And I hate the thought of England playing a final, but it really could happen at this point. They're playing the kind of turgid rugby. Farrell getting back in the field, popping drop goals, and the emergence of what I've decided is a world-class back rower from England, which is the first we've seen in a long time. But Ben Earl is starting to make serious waves. He had 13 carries, 7 tackle busts, 2 line breaks, 16 tackles. The man's a monster both sides of the ball, and he was the one who upped that physicality and started taking it to the likes of the Bottiers and the Tuisovas of the world. I mean, few people want to run in front of those blokes, and Ben Earl was there every time laying on the hits. So they've found a good one in him, but maybe it's my tip, or maybe it's the fact that those hot pink shorts just didn't do it for me.
And for those that missed the comments made in the press conference, why don't you just enlighten us to what was said?
Oh, I don't have them up in front of me, mate.
There was some because I haven't seen this story or heard anything of it.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to paraphrase it. Okay, so it's not a direct quote; it's a paraphrase. But essentially, there was some criticism towards the referee by the Fijian captain regarding the officiating at the tail end of the game and the lack of penalties being called for the Fijians against England. And so, it was a pretty direct comment. I'll see if I can get it up whilst we're talking about some other moments within the game.
Go for it, Lockie.
Please.
Easy. We had, so this is Waisea Nasiolavu. He said, I'm very emotional at the moment. A lot has been happening in this week, and I'm just proud of the boys. A few calls didn't go our way. We're just fighting, and I just ask that the ads stop popping up on this website. No, I just asked that we can make a fair decision when our team plays. Nasiolavu was then asked directly if he believed Fiji were victims of unconscious bias, and he answered, absolutely. You guys watch the game. You guys can answer that.
Yeah. No, those are strong words, right?
And I think that's...
Yeah, you go, Endo.
Yeah. For me, my perspective, I think that there is an unconscious bias against the Fijians. Like, much like there's a particular way that we believe South Africa will play or England will play or so on and so forth, that there's an unconscious success bias towards New Zealand, that they're not going to be making mistakes when playing Australia because they've got the wood over us. Unconscious bias filters into every element of life. And I personally think that there has been unconscious bias against, say, Moana Pacifica and the Fijian and Drua within Super Rugby Pacific in the officiating that's been there. And so in my mind, it seems perfectly reasonable to hold that opinion based upon your lived experience. And so if he feels that at the end of this incredibly tense game that calls haven't gone his way, no wonder he's bringing it up in this moment. I can really understand that. May not be true, may not be right, but I can understand why he's putting that forward.
And it is something that it's a narrative, unfortunately, that has formed through this World Cup, that some of the Pacific Island nations, particularly Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, have felt at times like they weren't getting the rub of the green or the fair share of the calls, particularly in the 50-50 ones. I wouldn't go as far to say that Fiji lost this game purely based on some of those decisions, but there were incidents in this game that had they occurred to, I mean, first world nations, we're probably looking at a little bit more intently. Sam Curry a number of times was making leg diving tackles, no arms wrapped. He got pinged for it once, but he did it a number of times. Like those sort of things are really dangerous, and where it almost felt at times like they were waiting for, not that they were, but it felt like they were waiting for a serious injury or an outcome to come out of a tackle like that to have to look at it. That we need clear and obvious head contact or clear and obvious dangerous contact for it to happen, when in reality they probably should have been pulling it up earlier and getting on top of that early in the game in the first few minutes and just saying, Tom, pull it in. You've done a few of these now, but it allowed to flow into the game.
Yeah, look, there are a few moments within the game that could be seen, maybe not controversial, but at least raising some eyebrows here and there. But in the end, yet again, I mean, you got to love to hate this guy. Owen Farrell, the highest ever point scorer within English rugby, kicking drop goals, slotting a late penalty to secure victory for England. I mean, the guy's damn good. And it's really, really hard to accept that. It was interesting to see Marcus Smith be on at 15 to partner Owen Farrell in at 10. I did find it interesting that Vinaya Hambosi continued his people-beating ways and got yellow carded for a head-high tackle on Marcus Smith. He came off pretty bloodied and bruised after that. But yeah, look, I don't really have anything more to say about this game because I kind of just want to get into the France-South Africa. Any other comments on this match before we move on?
I think the final thing to say is Fiji has had a fantastic World Cup, and they're going to be upset that they didn't make it any further. And it would have been awesome to see them make it through to the semi-finals. But realistically, they took a long time to get into this game and to really find their rhythm. And as Lockie sort of alluded to before, the two late tries in the dying minutes of the game made the scoreline look a lot better. But for the majority of this game, England were on top. And it was only for that try that really sparked them in sort of the 65th minute that sort of started to give the Fijians hope that they were potentially going to get an upset. But up until that point, they didn't look like they were really bothering England. And so I think the result is probably a true reflection of the game, as much as it is unfortunate to see that we didn't get a full Southern Hemisphere sweep across the quarterfinals this week.
How good would that have been? But unfortunately, we did not receive that. So let's move now into the next match, the final quarterfinal, which was France versus South Africa. And look, there's a part of me that is incredibly disappointed that France has been knocked out. They have put on a wonderful tournament. From all accounts, it's been awesome being at the stadiums and the opportunity to go out into the French countryside and partake of the local cuisine and grapes has been next level. But they came up against a South African team who were brutal. You spoke about, Lockie, the physicality within the New Zealand game. This match from the outset was almost violent. It was on that level just down where it's like willful damage being caused against other human beings for enjoyment's sake. But instead it was just channeled into and in between the laws of rugby to make it okay. How did you feel with the opening moments, Lockie, as this game started to unfold?
Sore, really sore. Just the sight of everyone pulling themselves off the field, almost dragging themselves off after 80 minutes. No one wanted to leave, and no one could leave. Everyone was completely mashed to a pulp. And I mean, seeing Quagga Smith's nose get wider and flatter every single game is a thing of beauty. He almost looks like a Picasso at this point. But yeah, it was war, wasn't it? Willful damage be damned. That was proper war, and you could see that, especially when Khaleesi ended up being subbed off for those last few minutes. He's still standing there on the edge of the reserves box, screaming and giving everything to his players. He's still bleeding from an ear, and it's just I know everything about that man inspires me to be honest. Sia Khaleesi just remains such an amazing figurehead from South African rugby. But the downside of all this, and I got away from it there, but the downside of this is France will be really, really buggered off with the ticket sales now, missing out on a bronze final or a semi-final or a grand final with the French in it. That'll tank them a little bit.
A little bit. You just hope there's enough expats and rugby lovers, and it's close enough to Europe that at the very least that they've got English fans that can come across, although you don't really want them in the stadium.
No.
But
I
one
imagine
thing
those
I
tickets are
will
already
just
sold.
quickly...
The French already
Yeah,
have
that's a good
those
point,
tickets.
actually. Those points.
They'll show up.
They have. Cyril Bai opened a scoring within the opening moments of the game, but it came after two really, really well done kicks in behind, where the French were obviously trying to turn the South African rush defense to try and sit their defenders down. They then get the line out, and the line out drive that they did in the lead up to Cyril Bai's try splintered the South African maul defense, which is something you just do not see. And it was in that moment, I just thought that this is going to be one of the most bruising games, like you mentioned, Lockie, that we were going to see. Mitch, any moments that jumped out from you within this game that you want to highlight and speak to?
Oh, I mean, the first one that jumps to mind is the thought at the very end of the game when I was watching this, that there's, I think, 90 seconds left on the clock. You're up by a point, and Faf de Klerk kicks the ball away. And I thought, what are you doing? Like, I know you're in sort of the 50-meter point in that area of the field, but you've just given France a sniff here. Hold the ball for 90 seconds, and you're through to a semi-final. And France went, what was the final minute? Like, they went 4 or 5 minutes into overtime as well in this game, trying to get the final points, but ended up coughing it up, and South Africa kicked it out to win the game. But geez, my heart was in my throat at that point as well, just thinking that that's something the Wallabies would do, kicking the ball away unnecessarily with the game on the line.
Yeah, but it's something, it's following their game plan of not playing with the ball in our own half. And if you think about it conversely, like, I get where you're coming from with that. You can think about it conversely and go, well, we don't want to try and just soak up the clock and do passive runs for the next minute and a half and then risk giving away a penalty when they've got an incredible kicker, Ramos, and they're only 1 point behind. So I can see the logic of just trying to boot the leather out of it and keep it up that end of the field. And they did have some luck earlier within the match, actually a lot of luck earlier than the match with their up and unders. It's actually how the second try of the game, Kurt Lee Arenza's try, came to be, where Mani Lubok just bombs it up. And France, I think it was, I wonder if this one was Cameron Wilkie who missed it. I can't remember if it was this one, but went up for it and it just burst free. Multiple times, the up and unders were able to cause massive questions within the French defense that they weren't able to handle. So you got Mani, you've got Arenze and Dialende who were able to capitalize on those points. Lockie, what do you think it was that enabled South Africa to get ahead within this match? Or what tactical approach do you think they brought that, won it for them?
Well, it was the aerial route, right? We saw that time and time again. It's just the French kryptonite. I mean, Panot is quite strong in the air, but it looks like they really exposed Ramos. And I have to admit, I've forgotten who was sitting on the left wing. It wasn't Gabin Villiers, but he wears the same headgear. So it always confuses me a bit who plays blindside wing without Villiers around. But I think they did get exposed there. And Dundee still didn't quite look at full fitness as well. I'm not sure if that was touched on while I was quickly turning over the potatoes. But it was just a case of a little bit of disjointment in that defensive line and how you approach your kick receipt that really exposed them. And the box, they'll keep kicking it. They kick the life out of it anyway. And if they sniff a bit of weakness like they did, it just became their kryptonite at the end of the day. So credit to the box. But also that comes down to experience, right? This is a South African team that regularly plays, whether it's through the URC or whether it's through now Champions Cup or the many members of their World Cup winning squad in 2019. They understand knockout footy and the pressures of it. And regardless of the hype around, this French side and, going to be world number one, they were 2022 Grand Slam champions and almost did it again this time around. They've only been to a quarterfinal. They've been to a quarterfinal in 2015 and 2019. They haven't had a great run at these tournaments. and the box just have that experience and that edge.
Yep. There's so much to be said for that, which again takes us back to why Eddie Jones cut all the experience from our team for this World Cup. But the interesting question, Mitch, did you see that Ibn Etzebeth attempted to intercept? Lockie, I'll jump in.
No, that's
sure
I did
Mitch
see
is
it.
having a drink of
I took
water.
a sip of water as you asked me the question. I was pretty surprised that wasn't looked at more intently. That there was a line break opportunity there, and it was no realistic opportunity to regather. Whether the ball went forward or not, I don't know. But the referee on the field said it went backwards, so play on. It's one of those grey areas, I guess, for mine. If you're a South African fan, you're sitting here going, of course, it went backwards. We're not even considering this. But as a neutral, it probably deserved a little bit more.
Absolutely, it deserved more. The ruling is not an intentional knock on, it's an intentional knockdown in a scoring opportunity, and that was the knockdown. I mean, he's bloody lucky.
Yeah. If that was, the thing that is maybe a precedent that saves Ben O'Keefe is, that Nick Tompkins knockdown for Wales against Australia 2 years ago?
Yep.
Where he's gone
and that's what jumped to mind for me as well.
Tried to catch it in front of him, dropped it. Yeah, it's exactly the same. The concept is exactly the same, even if the exact working out wasn't exactly the same. Anyway, Ibn Etzebeth, outside of that, was then absolutely a monster throughout this game. One of those players, like you was mentioning with Sam Whitelock, that just brings experience onto the pitch and just knows what to do. One of the things I loved was right at the start of the second half, it's 22-19 coming out of the break, and the Box get a penalty. And they're doing a tap from about the 5 meter line. And you've got a forward pod of the front row. And then right as they're about to tip, they tap the ball, they fake it and move to the left. And then Snyman comes up and takes it with Etzebeth supporting him. And then they recycle immediately to that forward pod, which is ready and waiting over to the left. And then they recycle it twice to the right, and Etzebeth goes through for the try. And I just loved that little bit of planning around those quick taps and a way in which the South Africans are obviously thinking, okay, well, if we're in this circumstance, let's make sure that we're not going to turn the ball over straight away, but actually we're setting it up in such a way that the defensive line won't have time to react to our quick movement. And so hopefully we're going to get over. And it was really, really well done. One final thing, Chosen Colby and Kurtley Arenze are small human beings. They are small and fast. Mitch, how good is it to still have a place for small people on the international rugby field in this day and age?
I think that's one of the benefits of our game when you compare it to the likes of AFL or NRL or soccer, cricket to a degree, I guess, that in those games, everyone looks pretty similar. You don't have the small, fast guys, really. Everyone's becoming big and tall and meaty and hunky. But we have a place for the little guy. We have a place. We have the wing. We have the fullback who is that versatile, that slippery guy who's able to make tackle busts or to sidestep around defenders and score tries and just do freakish things in the air. South Africa, having both of those guys on the wings, they're such a deadly option. And I think every other nation in the world would be envious of the talent that both of those guys bring and just how good they are with ball in hand, but also how good they are without ball in hand defensively. They're known for their ability, even though they are, as we said, small guys, they put in some monster hits in this game.
I agree. And if I can jump in, they just speak to the testament of investing in your sevens program. Like Colby, Arenza, Clogger Smith, they're all products of a really successful Blitzbox side from about the sort of that 2015 period onwards, when they were really successful, like constantly beating Fiji and England and and New Zealand at the top of the World Series rankings. It improves your one-on-one D. You cover space laterally like no one's business, and you can finish well because you have to. So investment in that sevens program has produced multiple World Cup winners now for South Africa, right? It's done the same in New Zealand with Savia and Rico, Sonny Bill Williams. There's heaps of examples we can look to. Let's do the same here. It works. Clearly it works and builds these guys' skill sets. And then when you see them in open space, shut the gate.
Yeah. And one player from this
100%.
Sevens series, one player that I've longed to see get a crack at 15s is Maurice Longbottom. Just the skill set that he has, over the ball out wide, put him in space and he just burns anyone on the field. He'd be fantastic winger. He had a few seasons during COVID in the Shoot Shield for Randwick, I believe. And at the time, they didn't really know where to play him. He sort of fit between, played a bit of fullback, played a bit of wing, but they said he kind of didn't fit anywhere. He's the type of player, he could be the next Cheslin Colby if we really invested him and gave him the time to really nail down 15 or 14.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention about Colby was that his 25th minute try, where there's been a turnover at the ruck. The South Africans have then recycled the ball really, really quickly, coming down toward the kind of close or near side of the field. Jesse Creel's got the ball running at an angle, puts a perfectly weighted kick through, and it just pops up into his chest, asking for a hug and a cuddle. And Colby goes through, and it was perfect counter-attack rugby. There is no other way it can be described. Every single player did every single thing, executing their skills exactly as they should. And don't tell me this South African team is boring and just kicks. They're creating pressure, and when they get the turnover, they execute incredibly well. And so it was, that was just a delight of a try to watch.
Before we move off Cheslin Colby, how good was it to see that charge down, and how important did that end up being for the outcome of the game? Have they kicked that, they probably win this game. So I can't remember the last time I saw a ball actually charge down, like contact made at a charge down. I've seen players get close, put the kicker off, but the last time I actually saw a player able to touch the ball and charge down, particularly out wide like that, incredible.
I'd have to dig deep into the URC archive. I think Grant Williams pulled one out last season for the Sharks. But aside from seeing it in a World Cup game, has there ever been one in a World Cup game? No less a decider or a knockout. Like that's
definitely
massive.
not a knockout. Definitely not a knockout.
Clutch.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the margin's 1 point at the end of the match. Oh, that is just so huge. We might move on now because we were wanting to keep this one just a little bit short, knowing how much we're going to be talking tomorrow night about the state of play in Australian rugby.
Yep.
We have 2 matches coming up. They are on Saturday at 6 a.m. and Sunday at 6 a.m. Obviously Sydney time, because that's where everybody should be referencing where they are within the world.
The best place in the world.
But it'll be Argentina versus New Zealand, then England versus South Africa. And look, I can see a world in where New Zealand in particular have kind of done their run already and maybe struggle to back up against this immense from this immense game. And Argentina have shown that they can beat New Zealand at least once in the last few years. So it could happen, but surely the safe money is on a New Zealand-South Africa final, Mitch.
Yeah, I think the only saving grace for Argentina and England is that you look at the 2 quarterfinals that both New Zealand and South Africa played, and they were tight, they were intense, they were physical, they were really strong games. Now, England got a bit battered around by Fiji, but Argentina came through that game against Wales pretty well intact. So the only thing you would say in their favour is that maybe New Zealand and South Africa are going to be sore and tired, and the 7-day bounce back is going to be a little bit hard for them. But realistically, if there's 2 teams in world rugby that you don't want to go up against in a 7-day turnaround, it's New Zealand and South Africa, purely because they've done this so many times. They know what it takes to win big games in big tournaments. And so maybe if it was France, maybe if it was Ireland, maybe that factor does embed into the performance. But South Africa and New Zealand know what they need to do to win these games. And I don't want to say that it's going to be a big score against both teams, but I would be very surprised if it's less than 10-point win for both South Africa and Ireland and New Zealand.
Yeah. Interesting thoughts there. Lockie, I mean, what is there a world in which Argentina win this match?
Yeah, there's a world. There's just not many of them in this case. I feel as though Argentina...
It's not
No,
the
not the
multiverse.
multiverse, sadly. But look, Argentina have beaten them on multiple occasions in the past few years. They had that cracking win in Sydney. They obviously got the Chockies
Like two,
last
right?
year in and they got the Chockies last year in Christchurch. So they've got a fantastic record, really. I don't know how many countries can say that they've banked 2 wins over New Zealand in the past couple of years. I don't know if even we can. So it's a pretty good time if you're an Argentinian. You'd almost rather come up against New Zealand than a Springbok side who hasn't been beaten by the RGs. I'm not sure ever in TRC history. Maybe they've got 1 or 2, but I can't remember it.
They came close this year, though. They came very close.
They did come close. But look at the belief in this Argentinian side now. They had a stinker against England first up, and since then they've done enough, and they've shown that they've got probably the outside backs to really challenge New Zealand. That's where so much of that talent is from New Zealand. You know, the Will Jordans, the Bowden Barretts, the dearth of options at left winger behind Fainga'anuku. You still got Mark Talia, you know, who was obviously missed out for disciplinary reasons, but that's still one of the 4 wingers in the world that you can pull out if you need him. So great coverage. And the Kiwis didn't even use McKenzie. So there's just stacks of talent that they can pull out against the Argies. But people like Mateo Carrera, Santi Chocobares has been incredible as well at 12. You know, this is an Argentinian team that could really challenge New Zealand early. And if they can start digging into some of those semi-final scars, because we've got to remember, there's not a stack of players from that 2015 team. There's a couple. There's your Aaron Smiths, your Bodies, your Whitelocks. Kane came off the bench, I think. But by and large, this is a team that hasn't been proven at a semi-final level. Argentina, they've got nothing to lose. And it's the same boat for England. No one even thought they'd get out of the pool. I didn't. I thought they were going to be pants, but here they are playing their crappy style of rugby, and they'll get into an arm wrestle if they can with the Box to try and make it one of those 15-12, 9-6 games, and they might even find their way into a final. I mean, truly, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an upset in here.
They'd have to have a really they'd have to increase the tempo, increase the physicality element. I think South Africa will just push them off everything. Just the set piece, the dominance in that way. England might be able to match them in kicking points off the tee, and that's probably the only area I could really see that South Africa might allow England into the game. But outside, the backs, the South African backs for mine are just so deadly with ball in hand that the like-for-like comparison up against England is a little bit meh.
Yeah, no one's denying that the Kiwis and the Saffers are hot favourites.
Yep. Yeah, I think when you look at the fact that New Zealand have had a perfect set piece record for the last 3 games, it indicates the task that Argentina have in front of them. Because if they're not disrupting ball at set piece, then how are they going to be stopping the New Zealand attack effectively throughout the matches? But that being said, Sunday morning, 6 a.m. Sydney time, get into these matches. We basically, I think, have finished with our reviews, and we might take a quick break before we then jump into the Wallaroos. So let's do that now. Let's go. And it is incredibly exciting to be able to talk about the first round of matches within a new World 15 competition within women's rugby. So this is a new initiative that has been driven by World Rugby. There's 3 tiers of competitions, and Australia and the Wallaroos are in the top tier. We are playing some of the best, we are playing actually the best teams in women's rugby. And we're going to be doing it in New Zealand starting this weekend. Australia is going up against England, the Red Roses, basically the best team in women's rugby.
Current world champions.
It's current world champions. It's going to be a match. It's going to be a match.
Oh, wait, no, they're not, are they?
A challenge.
No,
but
they lost the final.
Actually, no, they're not. Of course not.
It broke so many English hearts.
Oh, good. Well, as usual, anyone but England. Am I right? But the World 15 competition starts this Friday night at 7 p.m. local time, 5 p.m. Aussie time. It's going to be a big match. Lockie, thoughts on how this game is going to unfold?
Wow, hopefully better than the quarterfinal from the World Cup. That was 41 points to 5 in the driving rain. Friend of the pod, M Chance, obviously getting a cracking try with a nice big swanny, but that was pretty much the only highlight from that game. It was pretty one-way traffic. And England and France, I mean, they're both really tough games for our Wallaroos. Obviously, England, number one ranked in the world, obviously coming off their Six Nations Championship as well. But just to give a perspective of how far ahead they are rankings-wise ahead of Australia, they're 15 whole rankings points, not places, rankings points. They're up there in the 90s, and we're down around the 70s. So it's a huge hurdle for us to overcome. We've talked ad nauseum about the quality of care and programs that are in place between some of these fully funded teams and our Wallaroos currently. So it's a huge challenge for our girls. And what I really want to see is see them compete physically. I think that's where we've been exposed more recently against Black Ferns and to a lesser extent Canada. But that's what I'm chasing from the girls, a really physical performance and plenty of shoulders in the gut.
I think,
Mitch, what are you expecting or hoping to see from the Wallaroos?
I think the saving grace for the Wallaroos in this game and the slight edge that they might have coming into this is that we're mid-season, or we're towards the end of our season. We've only got this and then 2 other games, and then the Wallaroos are done for 2023. Whereas England is kicking off this is their first game. They've been in preseason in the lead up to this, so this is their first game in their season, and they'll roll into the Six Nations and their women's premiership competition over there in England. So we've got a little bit more, I guess, cohesive element than this England team at the moment, but when we're going up against a completely professional outfit, we're still semi-professional, part-time athletes. That skill set level is going to be difficult to overcome. I think, as Lockie said, if we can be physical and we can match up in the set piece, particularly, I think we might be able to hang with them. Whether we're going to have enough firepower to actually beat them and get over them and score enough tries, I think that might be the real tick up. But nevertheless, it's going to be fantastic to see the Wallaroos put in a huge performance against England. And if they can come closer than we did in that World Cup quarterfinal, then we'll be doing quite well.
I have read this trilogy called the King Killer Chronicles, right? It's by an author called Patrick Rothfuss, and he's written 2 of the trilogy. Okay, he hasn't written a 3rd one. And there's a Twitter account which is titled "Has Doors of Stone Been Released Yet?" which is the name of the 3rd book. And it's been about 10 years since the 2nd one was written and the 3rd one
it's not coming, Andy.
To come out. And every day, the Twitter account posts no, or posts not yet, or it's still coming. I feel that way about the Wallaroos and the commitment that Rugby Australia is making to having a roadmap or a pathway for the development of Australian rugby. We were promised this back in August or July, and it still has not arrived. And I just feel like everything is on the bloody back burner. And unfortunately, women's rugby is getting taken on that drive, because you were mentioning, oh yeah, maybe because the Red Roses are kind of at the start of their season, they've been doing pre-season. Well, basically, our girls are at the start of their season as well, because they haven't been
every game is pre-season
very long. They've been back at work.
Every game is pre-season. Yeah,
every game is pre-season. They've been back at work, and so it's just so bloody hard when the playing fields aren't equal. But with that being said, there are a whole host of games up. And if you want to know more about the World 15 competition, go to rugby.com.au, go to the Wallaroos section, and Nathan Williamson from rugby.com has put up a really, really good article there about what the competition is, how it works. Basically, we are going to be playing teams in the opposite side of the pool. So we've got our first game this Friday against England. The next one is going to be Saturday against France, and then Wales will be the 3rd game on Friday, the 3rd of November. So very, very, very excited for this match to unfold. But we did just want to talk about, Mitch, a quick change to friend of the pod, M Chance's rugby career. She was a bit coy when we last had her on, and we were asking about what's
I was
next
so close to getting that scoop.
And
it was coming. I could feel it.
Yeah.
All right, Pandaram.
Nice try, mate.
Only positive.
No.
Positivity.
He's
only
not bad
positivity.
mouthing M Chance.
Yeah. Exactly.
He's not the what's the word for those he's not a carrion bird, one that just flies around and picks corpses of the Anyway, Mitch, back to you.
Yeah, so Emily Chancellor, it was announced today, is going to Japan to pay for the pearls. I'm actually not sure. I don't have too much information about this team or even the competition, but fantastic to see that she has signed a contract. We don't know too much more at this point around the specifics of this contract, but we do wish her all the best as she does go over there and fly the Aussie flag in Japan. Whether that will sort of clash with Wallaroos commitments next year, I wouldn't think so. So I would imagine that we can still see her in Wallaroos gold in 2024 as well.
They're in their sixth season together, and they've got a really cool website with a great photo up the top of it. So I'm currently looking through it now. But yeah, that's as much as I can tell you. But either way, what it does show, and what I do love, is that Em is taking the opportunity to explore and to obviously head overseas, like we saw previously. And this time she's going to Japan and being a trailblazer within Australian rugby, because as far as I'm aware, no female rugby players have played in Japan. So she's breaking ground and creating history.
We've had the opposite.
Our women, and how good is that?
We have had the opposite. So we've had some Japanese girls play for, I believe, the Force and maybe some for the Brums this year in Super W. But this will be the first time that we've had Wallaroos girls going over and playing Japan. And whether this is a new sort of pathway that's been developed with the agreement with Japan Rugby, the handshake or the memorandum of understanding that was agreed on earlier in the year. I mean, if they want to take one of our Wallaroos, that's fine. If they want to take our coach, maybe not so good. But we'll get a bit more details on that tomorrow.
Very nice. Very nice.
I am currently reading that Laurie Kramer might have played for them previously. This is fascinating. Okay, I'm going to look into that a lot more. Anyway, team, it has been fun talking all things Aussie rugby and all things Rugby World Cup with you guys. So best of luck to the Wallaroos this weekend.
And one final bit of news that was picked up
to anyone but England.
One final bit of news that was picked up in the New Zealand Ireland game on Stan Sport. Stan did announce that they picked up the World 7 Series next year. So the Sevens will be on Stan Sport. Yes. So officially we will be the one. Well, Stan, not we, not yet. Hopefully
it's us.
One day. Maybe we're speaking of one day. They will be the one-stop shop for all rugby. Just the amount of rugby that they have is just incredible. So fantastic that we can finally officially get rid of our KO subscriptions or our Fox Sports, whatever you want to call it, for just to have that just for the Sevens, and we can just have Stan Sport and watch all of our Aussie rugby content in the one place.
I, for one, welcome our new rugby overlords. So with that being said, team, thank you so much for being with us. And I hope that you have a wonderful night. Keep an eye or an ear out for the pod that will be released in tomorrow, whenever you're hearing this.
Or even out.
Eddie Jones. And
or even out by then.
Or even out. So have a wonderful time. We'll catch you later, team. All the best. Bye.
Bye.